Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Here we go. State Representative Joan Ballweg of R-Markesan is a Republican candidate in the 14th Senate District. The primary is August 11th. Joan, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Thank you very much for having me, Steve.
Well, my question for incumbents or those that want to move up from the Assembly to the Senate, if that happens, top priority in the next session, please.
Well, I think it's just a continuation of what I've been doing in the state legislature for the past 16 years, which is a focus on reducing regulation, making sure that we're being good stewards of our the money and the funds that we are dealing with, and of course to provide great constituent services.
Okay, thank you. Well, you talked about the money you're dealing with. If the governor is right, and because of the pandemic, we are $2 billion with a B short in the general fund in this year, tough choices: cut spending, raise taxes, or fees. What would be your approach?
And I've been actually warning people when I've been out talking to school districts and the general public that we should be able to, we will have to tighten our belts when it comes to this. That's what individuals who have been on furlough or laid off, that's their reality. And I think that is the approach we're going to have to take. We're going to have to deal with what we have. Now, the federal government, of course, has been providing some great help to many businesses, organizations, and I think we still need to figure out exactly where that's going to land to see what the state can do to be able to help moving forward.
Okay, new subject. Joan, Americans have seen a lot of how some police officers treat those in custody over the last 3 months. The governor's 9-bill package would ban chokeholds, no-knock warrants, and universal training standards for police officers. Could you support the governor's police reform package?
Well, I think we first have to work with the Department of Justice and what their training standards are right now, because we do have state standards for training. Some of the things that happened in with the George Floyd situation, of course, were not what that individual was trained to be doing. I don't think there's any training officer that would have condoned what happened there. So let's take a look at what we do have in place for training. I know several years ago, there was some emphasis, and I was supportive of a package that actually looked at some of the psychological background of officers to see if they are actually the best to be inclined to be law enforcement officers. It's like any other profession. We can find people that are not doing all that they're supposed to be doing. And I think part of the problem is making sure that the administration in law enforcement is able to make sure and do all that they can to make sure that the attitude is also right for officers that are enforcing our laws.
New subject: reapportionment. Constitution says, as you know, the party in power shall draw the next congressional legislative district lines. The governor wants a people's commission that would draw the lines, then forward them to lawmakers to enact. Where are you on that issue, please?
Well, our Constitution says that it is the legislature that does this. The governor is putting together that commission. I think it'd be good for us to take a look at what they come up with, but not to just adopt their recommendations wholesale. That isn't what happens with the Iowa model with their commission either. I mean, they have to either up or down vote on those things, but they need to take a look at how these are put forward. it's going to be difficult for any commission to be thought of as nonpartisan. That doesn't seem to be something that is actually possible at this time of year. But there are rules and regulations that have to do with putting the maps together, communities of interest, making the districts as compact as possible. But here in the 14th Senate District, it takes a lot of area to find 180 some thousand people in the rural area. So you have to take a lot of little pieces put together. I think the largest city in the district is about 7,000 people. So it does cover quite a wide range of territory.
Where are you now on medical and recreational marijuana?
Well, I don't see that recreational would be a benefit to our communities, to individuals. With the COVID shutdown, we're seeing more and more instances of people getting on the wrong side of things, whether it's drugs or alcohol, domestic violence, those types of things. I have talked to one of the advocates in my district for medical marijuana, and who does have medical marijuana business in Michigan. And I'm very open to taking a look at where things would be helpful for individuals. After all, we do have right to try legislation when it comes to pharmaceuticals. We've passed the laws allowing for CBD oil. And if there are things that we can document that are helpful, I think we need to move forward with those kinds of studies.
Okay, let's talk about property taxes. Joan, you know that we're a high property tax state, which is why there's caps and limits on what school districts and local governments can levy. Now, referendums, you can exceed those caps. Mm-hmm. Do you think we should keep those caps and limits in place, or is it time to consider getting rid of them, please?
Well, I do think those caps are something that should stay in place, but I think that we need to make sure that all our areas of government know that they can do referendums, just as our school referendums have been very successful in many of my school districts. My local school district has done recurring referendums to go beyond their limits, because they could make the case to the citizens that they needed these funds and they were using them responsibly. And I think that is the best method, so that our local electors are the ones that have that opportunity to make those choices.
Is it time to give local governments, because they're so reliant on the property taxes, mm-hmm. Alternative sources of revenue, maybe expand the 5% sales tax to some now exempt products and services? Or how about what City of Milwaukee wants to do, levy a half-cent sales tax? Do we need to give local governments more revenue options?
Sales tax is the most regressive kind of tax that there is. It is something that is more affected by people of lower income. So I would hesitate to try to put sales tax out there as something that would be the panacea for local governments. I was in favor of that extra county sales tax that we were talking about for to use for maintenance of roads, that was talked about a few years ago by means of a referendum. Anything that would be done in that way, I think would be necessitate being done by a referendum. But I do see that it is a much better means to ask those local property taxpayers to move forward in some kind of a referendum, rather than just going across the board with sales tax.
You know that we haven't got a stable funding source for our highways. The governor recommended raising the sales tax. Where are you on the potential raising our 30.9 cent sales tax that really hasn't been raised in 10 years. Please.
Well, I was in favor of raising that gas tax, as was many of my colleagues in the state assembly over the last couple of terms. I just mentioned the additional sales tax that would be mandated by local counties to go toward their roads for their municipalities, to allow them some catch up. Unfortunately, some of the strategies that we did in the last budget, we'll see what happens now with the Supreme Court rulings that came about. But I thought we had a good strategy to try to help our locals with putting extra money into that LRIP program, which the state Supreme Court has now found that veto to be unconstitutional. So hopefully we can get back to that, and maybe we can take a look at that in the next budget also.
A couple questions on the pandemic and its impact. It not only reduces state and local tax collections, puts great strain on our healthcare systems. We've seen the role that hospitals play, Wisconsin and nationally, fighting COVID-19. If you're a senator voting on the next budget, do hospitals deserve an even greater priority than they may have in the current budget?
Well, I've been a great supporter for many years of our critical access hospitals in our rural area, and we have done some special things for that. I've supported the federal funding for our critical access hospitals, which all the hospitals in both my assembly district and my Senate district are critical access hospitals. We have to take a look again, just as I mentioned before, what's coming down the pike from the federal government. There is money that's going to hospitals through the CARES Act. There's talk of additional federal funds coming to our hospitals. There's also some talk about, is there a more strategic way that we can help plan for hospitals when it comes to things like ventilators and PPE that we're short? So is there a role for state government to maybe be that, assist in that stockpile or help, so that if there is something critical that comes forward, we're maybe in a better position to help them moving forward?
Another question on the pandemic. If a business follows all the CDC or the WEDC rules and regs on keeping customers and their employees safe, should they be immune from frivolous lawsuits?
Well, they certainly should, and I think the key word to what you said is frivolous. Everyone should be immune from frivolous lawsuits, but have the opportunity, if there is neglect by any individual or any business. That's why I was really in favor of the WMC plan when we were reopening, so that there would be some kind of guidance or indicator of what the level of safety in a particular area for a particular business was. And I think that is something that could still be useful in moving forward.
Okay, new subject. When a local government plans a major public works project, should the bidding and other requirements require that they give a preference to Wisconsin businesses? And here's why I ask. In 2015, out-of-state contractors got $72 million in contracts for these public works projects. That more than doubled to $146 million in 2018. Local governments have to give preferences to Wisconsin businesses?
Well, I think the first responsibility of local government is to be good stewards of their resources and revenue. And that means taking the lowest responsible bid. Now, I do know that there are municipalities that will sometimes have a right through the bidding package tell you that they will give a 5% preference to someone local or 10% preference. That's something they can put out on the front end. I believe in the free market. So individual businesses are competing with whoever else is out there. And if they can meet the criteria of that local municipality, good for them. But it is, I think, the number one responsibility of local officials to be good stewards of the taxpayers' funds that they are entrusted with.
Thank you. Final question. You've got a primary August 11th. You want to highlight any differences with your primary opponent? Why are you the most qualified?
Well, I think just use that last term, most qualified. So not only have I been in the legislature for the last 16 years, in the assembly, very productive in making sure that we're streamlining government, working with individuals and organizations to make sure that we are doing the best that we can for their customers and their constituents. And one of the things that I think has been the hallmark of my office in the Capitol is something that I brought to it because of my 44 years in business, is customer service, and making sure that anyone that has an issue will be helped in trying to get to the right answer. Sometimes it's not always the answer they want, but making sure that individuals know that we'll reach out and help when it comes to individuals' concerns with agencies. Sometimes agencies are not always as open to discussion as we'd like them to be, and we've seen very much in this in the last several months in working with unemployment and the Department of Workforce Development. We've had a very robust system and encouraged all our constituents to contact our Capitol office to advocate for them and make sure that their needs and their the shortfall in getting through to the unemployment was at least highlighted. And we've had some success. Not every case we've been able to handle has been successful, but we've had a good measure of success in trying to get those unemployment benefits to the people who deserve them. And I think that is something that is, along with the policy, something that is not often talked about as something that is a major responsibility of any legislator in the Capitol.
Well, thank you. State Representative Joan Ballweg of Markesan is a Republican candidate in the 14th Senate District. The primary is August 11th. Joan, thanks so much for talking to WisconsinEye.
Very good. Thank you for having us, Steve.
You bet. Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.